G'day and welcome back to RC Model Reviews. I've got a box chock full of stuff here. This is the ZMR250 Mini H Quad, the version 2. This one's come from FPVModel.com. It's branded Dragonfly, and it's got the new 4mm thick arms, which are supposed to make them less vulnerable to braking. It's got a power distribution board included in there, and this is the ARF version. Well, they call it ARF, but really you've got to put it together. It's a kit version, which includes just about everything you need to get the damn thing in the air. Now, I've done the mini quad build videos, and some of the parts that are in here are very similar to what I used in the DIY one, the build video series, but some of the parts are not what I would have chosen. Now, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you want to buy everything in one place, in which case you can get this, and that will save you a lot of farting around ordering different bits from different places? Or do you want to have a slightly higher spec quad, which may involve buying parts that are better than the ones in here? Because I'm going to go through, yes, I'm going to do an unboxing. Oh, but it's necessary because there's just so much damn stuff in this package that it would be impractical not to unbox and show you what you get. So we'll start with what's inside the box. Here we go. Breaking new ground here. Look at this. It's chock full of stuff. Let's start with the basics. I shall move the box to one side so we can get a better view of what I'm talking about. Well, it has a power distribution board, obviously. Now, this is a PDB. It's the ZMR PDB. It has something written on it somewhere. I've lost. Here we go. It's called ZMR Mini H Quad PDB. Okay, it's got good and bad. I mean, everything's got good and bad. This has particularly got good and bad. For example, it's got an onboard beck here. I want to just pull in a bit, get a bit tighter so we can see. Hopefully the camera will focus if I go a bit tighter because it has a limited focal range. Here we go. Hopefully that's still reasonably sharp. We've got a UBEC here. This gives you your 5 volts. Why do we need 5 volts? Why can't we just use the ESCs, the power that comes from the ESCs? Well, that's because they give us these. These are the, try and get the shine off there. These are the, oops, this way around, the DYS20, and these are an Opto Esc. What does that mean? Well, in the old days it meant it had an opto coupler rather than direct wiring to your receiver, but what it means now, these days, is basically there's no beck in here. So this doesn't produce any voltage coming out to drive anything. That's why there's only 2 wires, a black and a white wire, going to the servo connector. So we've got to get 5 volts from somewhere to drive our receiver and our flight controller. This is what delivers that voltage. It's a 5 volt beck. And it's a switching mode beck, so that's all very well and good. That's very nice. What I'm not that happy about is, I mean, these bits are all proud of the board, and mini quads take a hell of a bang. You know, they take a hell of a crashing from time to time. And things like this ferrite here, that's quite a heavy piece of material, and it's only held on by the solder tabs on the side of it. So in hard bang, this could come loose. What I would do is pour some epoxy on here. Hot glue won't do it. You need some epoxy just to hold everything together so it's not going to get subjected to quite the same shear forces in the event of a crash. It's a small thing, but hey, that's what I would do. There's another fault with this PDB. I'm going to look at it very quickly now, but I'm going to do it in depth later on, and that is that because we're using carbon arms, there should be no conductors under these mounting points. Turn it over. This is where the arms go. So we've got little conductors here. There's little traces here, which probably you can see the little trace. Now, the carbon arms sitting over the top of these, it could short that to that, and therefore we get a problem. And the manufacturer knows about this, so these are now shipping with some nylon washers to space the power board away from the arms. This one doesn't have it. It's an older version, but bear in mind that if you have an older version, or if you have a new version, you must put something under here just to stop the carbon from pressing against the PDB. I'll show you, as I say, later on I'll show you more detail about that because I may end up doing a build video on this, but I'll talk about building in a moment. So there's the PDB, gold-plated lands. It's not so bad. There's some downsides to it. For example, if we look underneath here, here is our, where are we? The negative lead for the ESC. I'll go to macro mode so we can see this in a bit more detail. Hang on. Okay, here we are with the close-ups, and as you can see, there's that beck, there's the bits and pieces. Hopefully I'll be able to get on here, just show you. I was not totally overwhelmed with the beck. I don't think it's going to focus, but some of these components aren't perfectly, whoops, where am I trying to do this? Looking on the viewfinder. Some of these components here are not perfectly flush. This one's on a bit of an angle, it's a bit canted, which means, you know, there's potential for problems if it's not potted. But going back to these arms, come on, focus please. Here we go, where are we? I'll show you, I've already done one. Here we go. This is the underside. This is where the arms would rest. Now you see these are these traces, and I've scratched a little bit of the solder resist away there, the solder mask away, so you can see there's actually copper under there. So this protective coating is very, very thin, and if the arms are rubbing here, it can short that to that, and it can short on the other side over here. We've got similar sort of things, which is it over here. We've got another thing there. It can short to there and over here. So where the arms actually sit, if I put an arm on here, if I line up the holes, hopefully, it's hard to do this backwards in the camera, there we go. You can see it actually covers up a lot of these things here. So we could effectively short out this little trace under here to that trace, and that could cause magic smoke to come out. So those washers are important. But what was I talking about before I got distracted? Oh my goodness, yes, these over here. Now, you see here we've got our negative connection for our battery, and if we look on the other side, you can see there's a whole lot of little holes there. See those little holes? Those are called vias, and they just enable one side of the board to be connected to the other. So they're just conductors that plated through holes which go between the different, yeah, there's a pretty shot, plated through holes that go between the copper there and the other side of the board here. So the voltage for the two front ESCs are travelling through this fairly big piece of copper here, but if we look at it, really there's some really narrow bits here. Has to travel through there, and if we look here, this is actually separated, so it can't travel down there. This connection here has to travel all the way through there, around there, through this tiny little gap here. So there's going to be some high resistance points. Both the ESCs have to pass all their current through these tiny little pieces here. It's not good. It's not good at all. That can cause localized heating. It can cause delamination of the board if you're drawing a lot of current. Now, okay, we're only drawing a maximum of probably 24 amps combined through the board here. But even there, 24 amps through that little piece of copper, it's not good. And it also means that if there's a crack or something, a bit of stress, and it cracks across there, then everything becomes intermittent. Speaking of which, notice how thin some of these traces are. Very tiny, very thin, narrow traces here. On a board like this, which is going to get some shocks and bangs and knocks, it's not a good idea to have traces that thin, because the tiniest little crack will then make things start working intermittently. And now I don't know, I haven't used these, I'm not sure whether they have that problem or not in use. I guess we'll find out when we give it a thrashing. But the board design could be better. It could be a lot better. I mean, if I was designing this board, I'd do it dramatically different to this. There's also other stuff on here. You can use an OSD. It's got connections for OSD somewhere around here. It's got the camera connection, so it does the job. It reticulates all the wiring without having to have long runs of cabling across the board. But it's as a board, I'd give it a 4 out of 10 because of the issues I've just mentioned. So it could be better, but hey, it's going to be better than nothing. But that's enough about the PDB. There you go. So you get a PDB. Also, obviously, in this box here, which I've got off to one side, you get your other frame members. Now these are the top and bottom plates. I'm not sure how thick they are. They look thicker than they used to be. So I'm going to get my dial calipers out, measure them so I can give you the facts, not just whatever's written on the brochure. And in fact, with my dial caliper, old school technology, I can tell you that that is 2 millimeters thick, and that is also 2 millimeters thick. So these are up, I think these were 1.6 on the old version if I recall correctly. So they've thickened up these two plates as well. That's very good. Of course, it does make them a bit heavier, doesn't it? In fact, they feel quite hefty. They do feel heavy, so I'm just going to throw them on the scales here, which is also off to one side, and see what they weigh. Won't bother putting it on the screen. Those two plates together weigh 46 grams, so it's quite heavy. But of course, it should be very, very strong. And here are those arms. Look at that, 4 millimeters thick, those arms. One thing that looks interesting though is it's almost like they have got two glued together. I'll go back to macro, show you there's a sort of a join line down the middle here. Let's have a look at that. Here we go. Can you see that sort of, I hope it shows up on the camera, there's a sort of a line runs right through the middle there. Now, is that an artifact of the milling process, or does it mean that these arms have been made from two 2 millimeter sheets glued together or something? I don't know. It's a little bit worrying, really. If they've just glued 2 millimeter pieces together, it's not going to be as strong as a single 4 millimeter piece of stuff. But other than that, they are obviously a matte finish carbon twill. Here we go. One thing that's disappointing, I have to say it's disappointing, is that they've made the arms thicker, but they haven't got rid of these stress risers. Why didn't they make this a lovely elliptical shape like this? You know, nice elliptical shape. It would have provided more protection for 2204 motors, which a lot of people are using now because they do last longer, the shafts are stronger, the bearings are better, as I've mentioned in previous videos. And by making this nice and elliptical out here, they would have avoided these sharp edges and the stress risers and funneling all the stress through this tiny area here. So although this 4 millimeter arm is stronger than the 3 millimeter ones, it could be a hell of a lot stronger and a hell of a lot more practical if they just redesigned it a bit. So yeah, okay, you know, got to remember this is budget, of course. One thing that surprised me, I got 4 of those carbon arms. Hold on, we'll go back to the normal shot so we can see what we're doing. 4 of those 4 millimeter arms, and I got a plexiglass one. Why did I get a plexiglass one? Did they leave it in the box by mistake as an accident? What would you use this for? As you can see, if I put my finger under here, it is a plexiglass. You can see right through it. It's and it's got the brown paper on normally used for marking out. It's got some lines on the top, but I don't understand why that's included in the box. Never mind. You wouldn't use it because it's obviously not as strong as the carbon arms, but why is it there in the first place? Now, there was also, of course, the little Mobius carrier thing and the little camera plate here that comes as well. As I mentioned, we've got ESCs, we've got the DYS20 ESCs. They're Simon K. Oh man, I mean, okay, I used Simon K ESCs on the on the low-cost mini-quad build because they were the cheapest available at the time. But these days, I would go for BLHeli. And I know that FPVModel.com sell BLHeli ones, so why are they including the Simon K ones? These days, Simon K, it's probably, it's like Chevy Ford, but I believe Simon K are behind the ball. I think the BLHeli's got more features. It just seems to work better. There's far fewer motor sync issues, as was once the case with Simon K, had motor sync issues in some releases. BLHeli's just so much better. So considering it's just a case of flashing it, why don't they just give people the option, or why don't they just ship the BLHeli, which is better? Yeah, I can reflash this, but it's such a pain in the backside. You've got to have an Arduino Nano or something stupid, which I don't have. So I'll use them as they come, but it compromises performance because it doesn't have the same performance as the Simon K. So we got 4 of those. It would have been nice to get 5, wouldn't it? It would have been very nice to get 5. So we got, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4. But 5, because these things blow up. We know ESCs blow up. It's just a fact of life. It's not because they're bad or anything, but sometimes magic smoke finds a way of escaping, and then your mini quad's tied up. And since these are only like, under $10, why not throw a spare one in? As I've said so many times, the difference between a good product and a great product is, little things like, do you get spare parts? And speaking of that, I mean, there's also somewhere in here we go, before I get onto this, there are the little rubber dampers for the Mobius platform, and there's 4 of them. Now, anyone who's ever had a ZMR250 knows that you lose these. You have a crash and the Mobius platform comes off, and 1 or 2 or even 3 of these things disappear into the grass. You never find them. So why not? These can only be like a cent each. Why not put in 8? And people think, wow, I've got some spares, and they think warm fuzzy feelings towards you and your company and your product. Instead of 4, put 8 in. A little thing like that can effectively really improve the impression of your product in the marketplace. Right. Naze board. Comes with a naze board. That's good. I like that. It's a full naze board. That's unusual. It's got the barometer and the compass on it, which is, hey, you don't need them for a mini quad. So I would have liked to have seen them just use the acro board, and the money for the compass and the barometer, put it into providing another ESC or some more of these, because it just makes more sense. Just makes more sense. And you've got some strips here for the servo connections. Now these are just tinned pin connectors. I like gold ones for servo connectors because if you get noise, especially on the PPM connection, it can cause problems. Gold would be nicer, and also it's only a single row, so you have to solder in each row individually, which is just a bit of a pain in the backside. They do show on the instructions, on the online instructions for building this thing, soldering directly to the naze board here with your wires off to your servo. Now that can save a bit of weight, and it also saves a bit of space in something as small as the ZMR250, but you've got to be very careful, because if you pull these lands off, because the wires get caught and something comes apart, then it buggers your board. You can't use your board if you've lost the little connections for your receiver. So something very important. Also, these are just straight. There's no right angle, so plugging in your servos, I actually find that in some cases right angle is handy. Can't remember what I used on my last ZMR250 build. It probably was right. Here we are. It's down here. I'll have a look. Yes, I used right angle. In fact, I soldered them underneath. I'll try and get you. This is one build I did. Probably if I put this here like this, you might be able to see. On this particular one, I have the Naze 32 board up here on pedestal, and I've run the servo connectors back underneath. So they're actually running on the other side of the board, not the top side, but the bottom side. And that has meant that I can plug all my wiring under the thing. It makes it much neater. And then I put my receiver up the top here. So yeah, there's not much flexibility because they give you that. Only give you the straight pin connectors, and they come in rows. So there you go. It's just something to consider. You get these. So even though you don't use these, they throw them in. If you follow the instructions, you won't use this. This is the plug that normally goes in the side of your naze along here and then goes off to your receiver, but the wires are way too long, and these are very stiff. PVC, not silicon, PVC. So you're carrying all this weight. I don't know how much it is, but it's not light. I'll turn my scales on again. Here we go. Ka-ching, hurry up. Come on, scales. Yeah, 11 grams. And every gram matters with a mini quad if you want good performance. So, yep, something to be aware of. Pillars, there you go. How many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 pillars. That's more than you need. So they do give you spare pillars, but hey, I'd rather have had some spare rubber bungs for the Mobius platform. A pad of 3M material. Now, this is good stuff, 3M stuff, obviously. Some of the cheap stuff's really crap. It just doesn't stick. It's, this is like excrement to a blanket. It sticks really well. Good stuff. Now, there's other bits and pieces, nuts and bolts, as you'd expect to bolt the whole thing together. Plenty of those, that's great. Little standoffs for your naze board, which are, okay, I like to have either my receiver under my nose board or my connectors, but you can't do either with those. They're a little bit short, but hey, that's just what you get. There's a couple of servo type connectors. I don't actually know what these are for, to be honest. I'll have to look at the instructions. There is a very good documentation online, as I say. You can download it as a PDF, or it's on the website, so I'm sure that will tell me what these are for, but it's not obvious from looking. And hey, you get a battery strap, and just in case you wondered who sent this in for review, it was FPVModel.com. There you go. We've got motors. Now they've sent me the 1806 Dragonfly motors. Now these, as far as 1806 motors go, these are pretty damn good. I've got no complaints. They do seem to last well. The bearings last. They put out good power, and now they come with clockwise and counterclockwise adapters on the top. See that? And I'm not a great fan of motors like the Sunny Skies that have clockwise and counterclockwise threads, because they build their threads into the bell itself. So the actual motor has the threads on it. I'll just show you here on a motor I happen to have standing by for the purpose. Here we go. Here's a Sunny Sky motor, and if we take a look at that, hopefully I won't do a macro because it takes too long, and I'm already making this video way longer than it should be. But you notice that the threads for the motor are actually part of the bell. It's not a removable portion. So if you buy a set of Sunny Sky motors for your mini quad and you want to keep a spare, well, what do you get? A clockwise or a counterclockwise? Because you can't use if you put the wrong motor on, if you put one with the wrong thread on it, the prop will forever come off. So you have to buy two spare motors just in case you burn out a clockwise or a counterclockwise. So this method where the removable adapter is much better because you only have to swap the adapter over. The motor is the same, so you can just buy a spare motor and swap the adapter over. Much better idea. Thank you very much for that one. Now we've got, as I say, it's pretty full featured. They give you some wire for your battery. Isn't that cool? So you can, this basically is between your battery and your PDB. Now that's really handy because those are little things sometimes you forget about. The only downside is that I take you back now to the 1970s. Ta-da! A Dean's connector. Are you serious? Come on, this is 21st century. It's 2015. Why not an XT60? I don't know anybody that uses Dean's connectors anymore. Certainly not for mini quads. So yeah, an XT60 would have been a much better option because this is just going straight in the bin. I've got heaps of those, never use them. They give you FPV gear, and that includes the AOMWay 5.8 gig mini audio and video transmitter. There we go. And so I'll open this up because actually this is going to be the best part of the video, folks. Don't turn off yet. Here we go. Let me read something from, oh no, it's not this one, it's the other one I should read. I'll read the other one. This is okay. So you get instructions and you get one of these, linear antenna. We all know that they're not the best, but they do work. You get some cables, which is the power cable to the video transmitter. And here's the cable that goes from where to where. This goes from the video transmitter outlet to your camera. But we've got a PDB for that, so I guess we have to cut this quite short. It's in the instructions. I had a look at that. Seemed to look okay. And then there is the transmitter itself. It's the AOMWay 200 milliwatt 5.8 gigahertz transmitter. This one is quite good in so much that it has a 5 volt output if you need 5 volt outs, but it's not so good because I prefer the ones with a little button and the row of LEDs for changing channels. The idea being that then you don't have to fart around with tiny little dip switches and little screwdrivers that you always leave at home to change your channels. And I know some people say they're no good because the ones with the button, you've got to walk through the band and you could knock someone out of the sky if you jump on their frequency. Well, if you're changing frequencies at a FPV racing meeting, you don't do it while anyone's flying. You have a downtime before the race when everyone makes sure they're on the right frequency before anyone starts flying. So that's not really an issue. There you go. That's, they're quite good. 200 milliwatts is more than enough for a mini quad. They do, because these antennas are about how you going, this is quite funny, they give you one of these, which in my experience is even worse. Another Chinese circularly polarized cloverleaf antenna, and these are just so bad. They are awful. Honestly, they are so awful. I don't know why they even bother making these things. I've yet to find a Chinese-made circularly polarized antenna that's worth a pinch of goat poo, honestly. Where'd I put my little pointy thing? Here we go. Let me go to macro, and I'll just tell you, I've probably already mentioned this, but I'll tell you again. Here's a close-up of that antenna, the top particularly. And I'll tell you some of the things that are immediately wrong with this antenna. For a start, we have these two metal collars, which are obviously designed to make the antenna easy to build, easy to manufacture. This is a manufacturing step. They've just, because labour is expensive even in China, so they've decided to make it really, really simple. So they have two collars here. The problem is that these collars are separated by a very thin insulator there, so they are actually a capacitor. They become a capacitor. So this has immediately got what we call capacitive reactance. What that means is when your transmitter looks at an antenna, it should look just like a completely like a resistor. It should be completely resistive. It should just absorb all the power and radiate it. When you have a reactance, that means it's not a pure resistor anymore. It might look like a capacitor, or it might look like a coil. So you can have capacitive reactance and inductive reactance. And what the capacitive or inductive reactance do is they upset the tuning of the antenna, because they affect the way it responds to the signal coming in. And you end up with things called standing wave ratios, and you lose power, and it just makes them crappy. So here we are. I doubt they've tuned out this by adding any inductive reactance somewhere. So this has just got a capacitor across the end of the antenna, which immediately is going to bypass some of the signal straight back to from the inside to the outside. So you're going to lose power through the capacitive coupling there. It's not good. And then, if we look at the distance between where this angled wire comes off, let's see if I can do it from the side. There we go. That's probably a fairly good shot. From where this angled wire actually starts out at an angle here to there, there's quite a bit of vertical component there. Now that's going to reduce your circular polarization. It's going to make it less circularly polarized than it should be. So this won't have as good a circular polarization as a well-built antenna, which has this angled piece going right back to the center there. None of this vertical component. So again, it's not very well polarized, and it's left-hand. It's left-hand. Why? The Chinese seem to ship a lot of left-hand polarized antennas, whereas most video goggles, if you're using like the immersion, the immersion antennas tend to be right-hand polarized. And if you don't know what you've got to check up and make sure, because if you're using left-hand on your goggles and right-hand on your craft, or the other way around, you can lose a great deal of signal, which means a great deal of range. So, yeah. What I think you should do with these, you can improve the situation dramatically with one very simple step. That's it. That's much better. And finally, well, not really finally, there's still some more stuff, but we have this. This is a 12 volt UBEC. It's a heavy little bugger. Hang on, I'll just weigh it. Because, let me put it on the scales, that thing weighs in at 14 grams of weight, and it's not that small either. Look, it's quite a reasonably sized thing. And that is if you want to run 4 cells on this mini quad, because the camera is a 12 volt camera. So you can't go feeding 14, 16 volts into it. Smoke will come out. So they give you this. But then one of the problems is if you use this and then you run on a 3-cell pack, your camera may black out, because the camera is designed for 12 volts. And when your 3-cell pack gets down to, say, 10.5, there might only be 9 volts coming out of this, because you lose voltage through these things. It doesn't matter if you're putting 16 volts in, you want 12 volts out. That's not a problem. But if you want 12 volts out and you're only putting in 10.5 volts, bad things happen. Your camera stops working. So you've got to decide pretty much whether you're going to run 3 or 4 cells. And you won't, if you go 4 cells, you won't be able to switch back. And if you want 3 cells, well then if you plug in a 4-cell pack, your camera's going to blow up. So yeah, I don't know why they don't use a boost buck converter. I mean, like the Polulu? I don't know what they're called. Those little ones you buy. I'm going to do a quick review on those later anyway. But they have a little board, much, much smaller, much, much lighter, and it will convert any voltage to 12 volts. It'll convert from 5 volts right up to about 20 volts on the input will come out as 12 volts. So even when your battery drops down to 10.5 volts, you're still getting 12 volts out. That's what they should do. And those damn things are so cheap. Why bother with this heavy, bulky, sort of only one way or the other BEC? I mean, not a good design choice in my opinion. And here is the camera. Unusual. Most of the time when you buy a camera, you get it in a box, it's got a lens on it, and away you go. They don't with this one. This is the FEO 4140 or something. It's Sony camera, 6 or 700 TV lines, and it comes as the bare board like that. And you get, also thrown into the mixture, which I've lost. Oh no, what have I done with it? There's a lens assembly, which I've misplaced at the moment, because I was going through this stuff before to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, and I've misplaced the lens assembly. Never mind. The little lens assembly screws on here. They provide that. And there's a little plastic film over here. You must remember to remove that. There's a little tab on there, which you just pull off. If you don't remove it, it's going to look like it's really crappy. It's going to be cloudy and everything's going to be slightly out of focus, and you'll think this is a really dumb camera. But I mean, the camera, it doesn't have wide dynamic range. I think it's not that expensive, but I'd pay the extra money and get the PZ2040, whatever it is, the 600 TV line Sony. It's going to be a better camera than this, but we'll test this out, see how it goes. Comes with this lead for setting up with the OSD. I mean, look at this. This is just for setup, really. So if you want to set up the OSD, you're going to have some kind of B&C connector that will handle a video, and a power lead, bayonet lead connector to plug into there, and then adjust things. But really, there's not too much to adjust on this one. It's not as good as the 600 TV line Sony. So there you go. And when I find that camera lens, I'll put it on. What else do we get in the box? Well, as I said, it's quite a full-featured thing, which is quite nice, because you get props, and you do. Finally, they give you spares. Here we go. We've got 4 sets of props. So, 4 crashes before you run out. Unfortunately, it's only 50-30 props, or only 5x3 props, and I'd like to see 5 4s, because 5.4s really make these ZMR250s pop. On a 5.3, they're pretty sedate. You put a 5.4 on, they really get a lot more power out of those motors. They get up and go. So, you know, given that there's no difference in price, I don't think, between 5.3s and 5.4s, it would be nice to see them go with the 5.4. These are bulletproof. Does that mean they're super strong? They just look like gem fans to me, but I don't know. I will give them a bit of a test, I suppose. Now, I mentioned before I'd found something funny in documentation. Well, here's some Chinglish that really tickled my fancy. I'll read some of it out to you. Now, this is for the DYS20 ESC, so some of you have probably already read this stuff, but it says here, especially for multi-copter throttle respond fast. And it says, suit throttle, which can be compatible well with motor. Throttle signal is twisted pair cable, reduce the crosstalk while signal transfer by the copper wire and flight mode more stable. Isn't that fantastic? Doesn't it instill confidence? This is fantastic. I think this, it gives you some information, tells you the current and so forth, but really, I think we can just get rid of this. Don't think there's pretty not much use, because I'm going to put BLHeli eventually. I'll test them on Simon K, put BLHeli on them. But there you go. So that's everything really that came in the box. And yes, I have done an unboxing, but it was a long one, wasn't it? So what I'm going to do now is, in conjunction with the documentation, as I say, which is online, I'm going to build this thing up as per spec, and we're going to go and give it a thrash on flight day, see how well it performs. Do those 4mm arms really hold up better than the old 3mm ones? What's the all-up weight? Because the carbon's getting thicker, it's getting heftier. And how well does that camera work? How well does the video transmitter work? And generally, is it a good value for money package? As I say, the real feature of this is that it all comes in one box, well, a box and a bag. So you don't have to fart around tracking down particular items. The downside is a lot of the parts are not parts that I would have chosen, and you have to decide if you're going to build yourself your first mini quad, then this might be a reasonably good option. But if you want to build a mini quad that's going to give you a greater progression, then really I would probably, for a start, I'd want BLHeli on the ESCs. I probably would look at, or certainly would use different props. The camera, I would use a better camera. So there's many different things that I wouldn't choose out of this. So you're sacrificing the best choice of components for convenience. Now maybe FPVModel will be listening and they'll say, hey, let's do one to a better spec, so that if you want to buy a ZMR250 that you'll be able to race or move from getting to grips into racing without having to replace parts, then maybe they'll do that. That'd be a nice thing to do. Let's see if they can do that. So there you go, thank you. Put your comments in the usual place, because that's why YouTube provides it, and I will get on with building this as quickly as I can. Flying day is rapidly approaching. I've got to get all these things together so I can get as much done on the one day as possible. So it's goodbye from me. As I say, I'll be seeing you shortly. And now it's clearing my bench and getting on with the build. Bye for now. There you go. I knew I'd find the bits that I couldn't find. So that's the lens assembly. As you can see, it's got a couple of screws, bolts onto there. And as you can probably see, there's a little tab here, this little thing by my finger here, a little plastic tab, which you lift to pull off the protective coating so the CMOS or the CCD sensor doesn't get damaged. Now it's goodbye. I lied, I forgot one more bag. It's got cable ties, it's got some of these spirally type cable routing stuff, and some screws here probably for the board camera. There you go. Now I think I've covered everything. As I say, very comprehensive. Bye for now.